My name is Obioma Chukwuike, and my pronouns are they, them. I am the founder and executive director for Intersex Nigeria. And I'm an intersex person, intersex activist, and I'm happy to be here to speak with the International Midwife Federation. At Intersex Nigeria, as an intersex activist, my major goal is to ensure that there's visibility, recognition, and respect for intersex persons in Nigeria, and also working with colleagues around the globe to ensure that intersex visibility and the intersectionality around our existence is recognized in different spaces and systems. That includes the sexual and reproductive well-being and rights of intersex persons, which has for a long time been marginalized, and a lot of injustice and violations has been happening. There are lots of issues around the sexual reproductive health and rights of intersex people, which includes intersex genital mutilation on children and adolescents, harmful medical and unnecessary intervention on intersex children and adolescents, and even adults to conform them to binary sex of female and male. And as a human being, we all know that we have right to dignity and right to life. So the sexual reproductive health and right is a component of a person that is very important. It gives them the right to self-determination and bodily autonomy, which is like a core, a core right for intersex persons, because most times our body are being violated because there is a goal to construct us or to correct us into being female or male, and in the process, it harms our body. It doesn't give us the consent to choose what happens to our body. It does not provide room for us to have enough welfare and self-care provisions, and also infringes on our right to choose what our reproductive characteristics should look like as a human being. So sexual reproductive health and right is like a core background of an intersex existence, because that is where our challenge and our issue starts with, especially the healthcare system, where the healthcare system have always told us that our body needs to be fixed to be accepted in society. And equally, the society have also told us that if we do not conform to female or male, that means we are going to be stigmatized and discriminated. And of course, we are being discriminated and stigmatized, and there's a lot of institutional challenges and issues that affect intersex people. So that's why I say that sexual reproductive health and right is like a bedrock of the foundation of the issues that intersex people face, not just in Nigeria, but globally. So it's very important that issues around sexual reproductive health and rights of intersex people is looked into, not just in healthcare system, but in different spaces that sexual reproductive health and rights is important. There are lots. Apart from the common unknown fact around intersex genital mutilation, harmful practices and all that, the consequences of these harmful practices on intersex people is where the challenge and problem lies. Because you find out that when these unnecessary, unconsensual medical interventions happen on intersex people, it leaves them with a long-term consequences and effects, which is harmful to their body, traumatic experiences, loss of inconsistency in their reproductive organ, urinary tract infections, and this affects their reproductive organs most times. And apart from that, it also affects their ability to choose what happens to their life when it comes to family formation. Because a lot of intersex people also want to have family, want to have a good reproductive systems in the process of them forming a partnership with someone, or even being a self-parent. And sometimes it affects them in doing that, even though we know that there are a lot of issues affecting intersex people when it comes to infertility. but there are ones that have been coerced because of the way their body have been treated in the past. And also it gives them this low self-esteem because of the scarring that has occurred during these processes of consented medical interventions. They have a lot of scars in their body that they don't want to share with people. And it takes them away, it isolates them from people. And you know what isolation can do to a human being. And most times, this injustice become a secret in most families, making intersex children become secret children that nobody knows about their life, their peers. They are not free to express themselves with their peers because there's no system, there are no systems that recognize them, one, and their bodies most times have been violated. So their parents have told them that they have to keep this as a secret. Most times the healthcare system also keep it as a secret, where their file cannot be found in the hospital system. So these are violations of sexual reproductive health and rights, because if you want to give someone full access to sexual reproductive health and rights, you should be able to explain to them what is happening to them, their body. You should be able to explain to them if some, medical interventions have happened to their body in the past, and what are the consequences that this will, leave them with, so that they are aware, they are fully aware of what has happened and what is going to happen to them. And also, I also think on the part of intersex parents, I'm talking from the part of where I'm coming from, Nigeria, you find out that most times intersex parents are not given full and adequate information about this medical intervention on intersex children. They are not being explained, they are not explained to the consequences and long-term effect that their intersex child is going to experience because of this medical intervention. We have had a lot of cases here in Nigeria where parents are still running around seeking for support to find ways to, amend the surgery and intervention that happened to their children. And when we asked them, were you aware that such consequences might come up? They said no, that they were never explained or they were never told about the consequences. So I think there is a lack of informative procedures that don't happen when intersex parents come into the healthcare facilities. And I also think that parents, generally young parents, are not aware that there's a possibility for them to give birth to intersex children. They are not, this information are not shared with them, maybe during antenatal or during processes where they come for advice on fertility and all that. So I feel like the healthcare system are not playing the role for sexual reproductive health and rights of intersex people, which is also like a huge gap, So I would say that there are a lot of intersectional issues because it affects their life in all its entirety. It affects them. There's a lot of discrimination that happens because nobody's talking about intersex people. Nobody's talking about the possibility of intersex people to be, and there's no justice for the violations that have happened in the past. So I feel everybody around this system, are doing what they're doing with the hope that nobody's going to, call their attention to it in a justice manner. So I feel there should be a lot of justice around or reparation around what has happened to a lot of intersex people in the past. I think the midwives have a lot of role to play in ensuring that justice is justice. When I talk about justice from my own angle, justice means prevention, and also justice if anything has happened in terms of violation, justice too. So prevention and aftermath. So that's where I'm coming from when I'm looking at justice. So that's why I said that the midwives have a lot of role to play in it, because I know that most times, or 90% or 95% when a child is given birth to, the midwives are the ones in charge to ensure that the child is cleaned up, taken to their parents, and even checking up the sex of the child. So how informed, first of all, are these midwives around intersex variations and the possibility of an intersex birth to happen? And if they are aware, how are hospitals ensuring that midwives are taking into consideration all these when a birth happens in the hospital? Are hospitals ensuring that midwives take responsibility to explain to intersex parents if they give birth to an intersex child? Those for the ones that are known from birth, because we're talking more of the ones that are known from birth, because not all intersex variations are known are known from birth, but everybody is born, any intersex person is born intersex, but they might not find out at birth because of the variation type. So what are the midwives doing to ensure that information is passed down? Because I know that midwives have a lot of relationship, especially with the nursing mother. How are they ensuring that there is a relationship between the mother and the child in terms of understanding that there's a possibility and this birth is not a disease or a disorder, instead is a natural occurrence? Because one thing that we have found out with intersex parents is that when they give birth to an intersex child and it's obvious at birth, they tend to get confused because it's not something that they are used to, in the system. Like when people give birth, they know that people give birth to male or female. So they are not informed, they are not aware. So how are the midwives trying to ensure that young parents or parents that work, or anybody that walks into their system to, deliver of a baby, are aware of all these options all these possibilities, because nobody knows who will give birth to an intersex child. And thirdly, what are the consequences when a midwife fails to give such information to the parent or to the person who has given birth? What are the consequences? Are there any laid down consequences or guide that can ensure that justice is served when a midwife does not do the right thing at the right time? So it depends on how incorporations, how institutions, healthcare institutions are incorporating intersex visibility, intersex variations into what they are teaching, because it also starts from when the midwives are being taught in school and when they are now practicing as midwives. Like in Nigeria, there are also traditional birth attendants who are like traditional midwives who don't stay in the conventional hospitals, and they're giving birth to intersex, delivering of intersex children. And most times they are the ones that will announce it that, oh, an intersex child has been given birth to, and is a curse and is a taboo, because they're not informed. They're also feeling like, oh, this birth that I've delivered of is not a natural occurrence. So how are they being informed? How is the Midwife Association ensuring that even the ones in the local environment understand that intersex variation is natural and is not a taboo, is not a cause? How are all these things, what are the conversations around these possibilities? So I think that is one thing the midwife associations should be doing, talking about these huge secrets that has been kept away for a long time, bringing it back to the table and talking about how to ensure that lives of intersex babies that has been lost in the past or that has been harmfully damaged in the past is no longer happening. So those are the conversations that I think should be happening right now. I think education is one thing for the midwives, so get educated, get trained if it's not happening already, which I don't think is happening, because I'm also talking from my context here in Nigeria. There should be a lot of education around intersex variation and how to go about intersex birth. And I also think if they can have like a standard operating procedure on how to go about intersex births, it would be very nice, so that it's not like you have to train each unit to get them to understand. We can just have a training and a convention where we come midwives, intersex people, intersex activists come together and they create like there's an agreement and there's a standard procedure that they can push for and say, oh, okay, from now on, we want to start using these procedures to ensure that every intersex birth is accounted for this way and is managed this way and is ensured that the person has a right to non-invasive and unnecessary medical intervention. So I think apart from education, creating mechanisms are very, very important. And also trying to understand the community is another important aspect to it. Because if you want to support someone, you have to understand them. So I think it's high time that the midwife started like having conversations with intersex persons to understand what they have passed through, to understand what would have been done better Because it's when you understand what people have passed through, you can also understand where the gaps are and how to, make up for those gaps. So I think is agreeing and accepting, first of all, that there's a gap, in the services provided for intersex persons, that there's violation of their rights in not consenting to those coercive and invasive medical practices is one part of it. Then seeking for way forward, seeking for collaboration, seeking for understanding is another way forward. By seeking of understanding, by seeking of collaboration, that is where the education, the provision of mechanisms can come in. Then it will give the intersex community a sense of belonging and a sense of, a sense of joy that, oh, the midwives are actually for us. They are not against us. We know that all midwives cannot always be for us. In any system, everybody mustn't be for you. But if the huge part of the system is for you, and if, for instance, the International Federation for Midwives are strongly for it, you can see that other countries can start adopting those mechanisms and those systems to ensure that they're also incorporating it in what they're doing in their own local environment. So I think these are some of and also creating awareness. I always tell people it's not only intersex organizations that should be creating awareness around intersex issues. The midwives can actually do that too, because I see them doing it around different, maybe if there are issues for children or adolescents, they do a lot of campaign around it and ensure that not just the nursing mothers or people that come to the hospital that have this information, that the wider audience also have this information. So I think they can also come in and also support the visibility of intersex variation and intersex people. So these are some of the ways that they can actually support too. The invasive and unnecessary medical interventions happen a lot. For adults, yeah, you can be coerced as an adult, but sometimes you can actually use your own discretion to say, no, I don't want this, or I want that. But when it comes for intersex adults, young people who are seeking for other services from the midwives, there's a lot to be done, because most times, for instance, in my context again, a lot of intersex people don't even know they're intersex. So they're just existing and they're passing through the day, or they're passing through their life as a normal person, like not a normal person, like other human beings. But when they go to the hospitals to seek for some services, that is why I talked about the midwives even aware of intersex variations. Because if you're not aware, you cannot give solution or give services about what you don't know about. So most times we don't even have that. We don't even have midwives who understand these variations and know how to support us. Maybe if we're seeking for maybe abortion services, or maybe family planning services, or any services that has to relate to our reproductive and well-being or health. So, and that intersex body has its own variation. So it's not as specific as the female and the male body. So there's need for understanding, because when there's an understanding, that is when the midwives can actually give you a proper information or proper services that you might require. But in the case whereby the midwife has the information, or if the person does not even have the information, the person can actually seek for, because I believe that as midwives, there's an association where you can talk to each other. So even if you cannot give that person the right information, you can refer the person to who can give the person the right information. But one thing that can allow that intersex person to actually hear you out and also want to work with you is if you're friendly, if your services and your information are not stigmatizing and discriminatory. Because most times when we go to the hospital, the information and services are discriminatory. When they find out that our body seems to be different from the conventional female and male body, there tends to be like this tune of how they want to treat you. And that's what makes a lot of intersex people, especially in my context, don't want to go to the hospital to seek any service. Because they're like, oh, if I go to the hospital, nobody's going to understand what I'm saying. I've had that a lot from, intersex folks here. They don't want to go to the hospital. They're always calling me like, where should I go to? I need this, I need that. I'm like, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know to. Because who will I turn to? Nobody is accepting that intersex people should have that right. But I also feel that there are people that are out there, maybe we have not been able to meet them, but I think friendly services for all will give intersex people the ability to even come into the service centers to seek these services. And when they come and you don't know it as a midwife, you can refer them to someone that knows that is going to be friendly. Because if you refer them to someone that's going to be discriminating against them, they are going to turn back and they will not return. And think about the consequences that might happen to that person because the person couldn't get the information or services that they want. And I also think that it's important that there is an understanding about the different variations, because when there's an understanding about the different variation, it gives appropriate focus on what you are meant to be looking at. So the need for education, the need for understanding, and also listening to that person to not treat them based on your own perception, but you're treating them based on what you know from them. Because I've gone to the hospital most times and the nurse wants to tell me how my body should look like, how I have to eat this, to eat that, to have more flesh and all, give you some advice that they don't even know what you're passing through in your life, and they want to give you more advice because they're not as informed as they should be. So I think creating more information, more awareness around intersex visibility, the challenges around the sexual reproductive health and right is important for midwives so that they are informed to know how to cater for intersex folks, whether young or old, because there are still old intersex folks too, who I can't imagine how they have been living their life till now, that intersex visibility is gaining more weight around the world.